BEAR stands for Brain, Epigenetics, and Altered States Research. It is also happens to be my children's last name. He's one of 3 boys. They are my bear cubs. Afterwards, good day. Okay. So I run a big lab. This is not even all of them. This is a pretty old photo. And then also recently, my dear friend and colleague from grad school, Dr. Sarah Menenga, has joined our lab from the New York University Psychedelic Center. Do you know Sarah? I just saw a face get light up.
Yeah.
So Sarah and I went to grad school together. We're both alumni of ASU. We both got our PhDs in the behavioral neuroscience program here. The very same year, so we both got our PhD in 2015. I went off to Switzerland and I studied with Dr. Franz Woldenweiter, which is the, he's not one of the biggest names in the psychedelic field right now to outsiders because he doesn't care about press. But if you're in the psychedelic research world, you will know that he's a brilliant, great scientist, and he was the first to include, to use human neuroimaging methods with psychedelic research back in the 90s. Okay, yes, I'm thinking about my decades correctly. Okay, so Sarah has joined our lab. I'm just so happy to make her a co-director with me into our lab. So what does the BEAR lab do? What are we interested in? What am I talking about brains and epigenetics and altered states? What does this even mean? So the BEAR lab is interested in studying how our epigenetic plasticity can respond to salient experiences throughout our life to shape our mental health. What the heck does that mean? Okay, I like to break it down in a lot simpler ways. The whole 20th century, psychologists in related fields were arguing about nature versus nurture. Who makes us more of what we are? What makes us what we are? Is it my genetics that I inherited from my parents that I can't change? Or is it every experience that I've had, even in utero, up until today? So throughout the 20th century, they finally landed on, it's both. No one wins. We can't figure it out. It's definitely both. And now with modern molecular methods, we can really start probing this question in such more interesting ways. And one of those ways is through epigenetics. What do I mean? Okay, so we'll backtrack. So we know that experiences are so related to mental health, right? And that is something that they found out in the 20th century. This is when the very first research about early life stress was coming out. Before the 1900s research, we didn't even know that kids really needed to be nurtured. In certain cultures, I should say. In the white, middle to upper class American culture at that time, it was not commonplace to be brain nurturing with your children. And then research came out showing that early life stress and neurodevelopment, the plasticity during neurodevelopment, are strong predictors for psychiatric disorders, not just post-traumatic stress disorder, but other anxiety disorders, other mood disorders, substance use disorders. And it's not just early life stress, but acute trauma in adulthood, such as armed robbery or sexual assault in combat. These are all strong predictors of the different stress-related psychiatric disorders. Stronger predictors than we can find in the genetics. Now, are genetics involved? Yes. We do have genetic vulnerability. They are not causal, and neither are our experiences. We are too complex that we'll ever figure out. It is job security for me, and I love it. And I think it is the most magical thing that we can possibly think of until we start adding psychedelics to it. Okay, so if experiences shape our behavior, behavior is nothing but output from brain. Now, some of you might squirm when I say that because of the idea of soul and spirit, the black box, and things we can't explain. I buy that. I'm for it. I'm telling you right now, we cannot explain how we are, who we are from our brain. We can't explain it. There is the component that we don't know. But what we know so far is that our behavior is a product of the brain. And if you mess with the brain, you can change the behavior in a million different ways. So how is it that experience is shaping behavior? We said down. Okay. This is the concept of epigenetics. The experiences that we have the ability to change us at the molecular level, essentially shaping our brain structure and function in a way that shapes our physiology and behavior. Epigenetics means it is epi for above and over genetics. So we're not talking about the nucleotide sequence that you inherited from your parents. We are talking about an infinitely complex code on top of the nucleotide sequence that regulates how much of what genes get expressed and when. Here in this picture, we show how we have our normal view of the double helix of DNA. Within every cell of your body, that's going to be wrapped around these green squiggly things called histone proteins. The tighter that DNA gets coiled, the less we can express genes in that area. And this is how we are complex multicellular beings. Because we all started out with 2 cells. Anyone know which 2 cells we all started out with? Sperm and egg, okay? That's where we all started. And then through division, every single one of those dividing cells had the same exact genetic makeup. But somehow they started differentiating into bone cells and liver cells and neuronal cells. Epigenetics is the mechanisms that turn the genes off that don't need to be turned on. So your bone cells don't want to be making neuronal axons, right? This is what we call cancer when we have aberrant gene expression. What we've only found out in the last, about 20-ish years is that these marks aren't just permanent in differentiating our cell lineage. They're modifiable, they're dynamic, they're responding to the salient life experiences that we have. And now there is an abundant amount of research, some from my lab and many others, showing how our early life experiences are regulating epigenetics of gene systems involved in mental health much later down in life, later in childhood, adolescence, and adulthood, which is crazy. So now we know it's not nature or nurture, it is nature and nurture, and they were interacting and they're constantly feeding off of each other. So my lab is interested in if traumatic experiences are so powerful that they're changing us at the molecular level and they're increasing symptoms, what's the inverse of trauma? What are the things in life that are so salient that they're healing, that they could be healing us at the molecular level, and that they're healing us and changing our brain function and structure in ways that are reducing symptoms, not inducing symptoms. My research started in early life stress and in addiction models. And during that time, I became an expert in all pharmacology of all the substances that humans like to take. And I was really interested in when I was learning about psychedelics, right? Ooh, scary acid. Schedule 1. What was I told growing up? If you take acid once, every time you sneeze, you're gonna trip. Because it's still in your cerebral spinal fluid. False. Not true. Yeah. He is quite comical. So everything I learned, like my whole life, it was always like kind of crumbling before my eyes. And I grew up in Alaska, and there's a joke that one of the reasons people move to Alaska is they hear how good the weed is. So it is common. Cannabis smoking is common in the culture I grew up in. And I always thought, like, the world should know, like, this is really wrong. This is really wrong that they're teaching everyone, like, oh, you're gonna melt into the couch and you're gonna ruin your life, and only losers do this. And I've often looked around, like, everyone I knew's parents did it, no matter their socioeconomic status. So I wanted to grow up and I wanted to break the chain and break through the glass ceiling and we start talking about cannabis use and responsible use. Turns out I didn't have to do that because people like Jake Plummer did it before I got here. But now I'm happy to be doing it with psychedelics. I'm very happy to be doing it with psychedelics. And I am very interested in the possibility that the psychedelic experience is the inverse of trauma and its ability to heal through molecular mechanisms. To that end, we recently were the first to publish epigenetic-mediated study of MDMA-assisted therapy in PTSD. Now I know MDMA is not a molecule that the Shroom Society is getting around very much because it doesn't grow in mushrooms. However, at the neurochemical level and the psychological effects produced by MDMA, which is the active component in ecstasy, by the way, we're thinking that there is overlap between how this compound is leading to higher efficacy in psychiatric treatments in similar ways as psilocybin is as well. So that paper came out in February. This is some of the data that it had. Basically what you're seeing is these are each dot or triangle represents an individual patient in this phase 3 clinical trial using MDMA to treat severe PTSD. On your y-axis, so that's the one that's the straight line on the left of each graph, you're looking at their difference in their PTSD score. And on the x-axis, the one on the bottom, you're looking at a difference in DNA methylation, which is the epigenetics that I study, at certain parts of genes involved in our stress system, our cortisol system. The cortisol system has been known to be dysregulated in PTSD for quite a while now. In fact, the founder of it, one of the authors on this paper. And what basically we're showing is the purple dots are the ones that receive MDMA, and the orange dots are the ones that receive placebo with their psychotherapy. And we show that those who received MDMA treatment, the changes in their DNA methylation of cortisol-related genes was highly predictive of the reduction in PTSD symptoms. This article was published in February, and it currently has more than 92% of all Frontier scientific articles, which is really quite amazing. And Frontiers is a ginormous publishing platform. So we are very proud of that paper, and we are very proud of where we are heading. We are currently running a study that is funded by the Arizona Alzheimer's Consortium. So we are looking at the effects of psilocybin on cognitive function and epigenetics throughout relevant brain tissue in aged rodents, with the idea of really wanting to assess if there's a potential for the neuroplasticity effects and all the wonderful effects that we have already heard about, and can help reduce cognitive aging. And then perhaps in the next follow-up study will be an Alzheimer's mouse line. Right now, this is just looking at typical aging, cognitive decline. We are also ramping up to start a study looking at the effects of psilocybin on epigenetic changes in addiction-related brain regions, kind of harkening back to my original work. And we are about to launch a large, massive online study that's going to be self-reported use, whether you have used psychedelics or not. We want to know, for you to tell us a little bit of history about your use, and then to give us other data about positive psychology constructs in your life, like cognitive flexibility and relationship health, and perceived stress. When we launch this study, it will be global. We are partnering with MindCrowd, that is an organization housed under TGen. They currently already have an online internet cohort of over 300,000 people who have gone online and done their cognitive assessments to help further the science of brain health. So, if you want to hear more about the online study that will be launched soon, you can follow us at the Bear Lab on Instagram and TikTok. We also are currently running a drug education campaign through these social media platforms, where I have a team of undergraduates who help me endlessly. Jackson is one of them. And with the idea that kind of, and Jake mentioned this earlier about like the education is just not there. Our children are being brought up in a world where they're taught alcohol and drugs. They're not even being taught that alcohol is very much a drug and the risk factors associated with it, as opposed to also the health benefits of other substances when used responsibly. So we are excited about that drug education campaign and hope that you can follow us to see it. Also, our next huge move that we are very excited about is we are launching the first centralized biobank of psychedelic studies. Thank you. What does this mean? What does this mean is every psychedelic clinical trial that has happened to date in today's modern world has been really small sample sizes. And that's fine, we know that. The goal has been changing FDA regulations so that these therapies can be available to more people. However, in the studies of genetics and genomics and epigenetics, you cannot have small sample sizes. It doesn't work. There's too much variance. So for us to ever get an idea of the interactions between psychedelic medicines and the human genome, which I think it is quite pure magic and spirituality, that we both evolved to match each other. The fact that the world of the queendom, thank you very much, of mycology has produced compounds that perfectly fit receptors in the human brain is magical. And in order to really dissect those interactions, we are creating a centralized database where we're going to be contacting past and current psychedelic participants from clinical trials around the world to be getting their samples stored here at ASU, where then we'll have a collaborative network of experts from around the world to be able to probe the genomics, the human genomics of psychedelic science. And if you're interested in donating to that cause, you can look at thebearlab.org. We have a donate button. And I hope that all of you get yourself a free shirt. We brought shirts. Jackson, would you like to stand up and show the back? Yes, with the very pretty logo, I support psychedelic research. Please feel free to take a shirt and gift it. If you feel called and financially able to donate whatever you can at the Bear Lab for the shirt, then that would be appreciated, but you really don't have to. Thank you so much.